Prynhawn da, good afternoon. We're just about to begin the session, as I think we've got most people here with us now. We've got over 300 people booked on with us today, which is amazing to see so much interest in this topic. So if you just bear with us a minute, we'll get started very shortly. Okay, so my name's Lauren and I work for Plant Life as a support officer on Magnificent Meadows Cymru project. We are funded by the Welsh Government and we work across Wales on the creation of wildflower meadows from National Trust sites to schools and hospitals and bringing people to these beautiful sites through a range of events and engagement activities. We're delighted to be here today and as part of the Spring into Action programme, we'll share a link to the full programme events on offer in the chat shortly. I'd now like to introduce you to Lucia, who's the Conservation Officer for Magnificent Meadows Cymru. She gives advice on how to create and restore species-rich meadows, and she trains others in all aspects of meadow management and monitoring. She has an entomology background and has a degree in wildlife conservation and a degree in ecology and environmental management. So we're going to have a presentation today, and then there'll be some time to answer questions that you may have at the end. We're going to be using the chat function. So I'm just going on there now to see. So hello everybody. We'll be using this chat function and we'll be populating it with a series of links to some online resources. It's not possible to download the chat, unfortunately. However, we will be sending a follow-up email to all attendees with a link to this recording and a copy of the presentation files and resources links. If you've got any technical issues, please let us know in the chat and we'll try and resolve this for you. And if you have any questions, could you pop them in the Q&A box, which is down at the sort of the center of the bottom screen. And it just makes it a bit easier for us to track them and ask them at the end. If we don't have time to answer your question or there's something that you think of afterwards, you can always contact us via email, and I'll pop our email address in the chat shortly. So lastly, the session is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube afterwards. If you're currently watching us on YouTube, hello. You won't be able to do the chat, but you'll obviously be able to hear the Q&A at the end of the session. So I'm now going to hand you over to Lucia, who will begin her presentation shortly. So just bear with us a moment.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi all. Let's do this sharing business. Right, hopefully you should be all see this now. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for those people that joined again after the session last week. We had an introduction into monitoring last week. So if you want a bit more information about a few different techniques that are around, and also into meadows in general, then please do watch our introduction later on. It should be already up on YouTube, I think. So I'm just going to jump straight into the presentation without any kind of meadow introduction. Talking about monitoring, I think it's quite important to know also what the difference is between a survey and a monitoring. So survey you might have heard about, it's usually when you just walk around your meadow and you maybe want to do a species list, which is really great to have. It's a good thing to start with. But really, it only kind of gives you a one-off snapshot of what's happening in your meadow. It doesn't show you things, how they're changing over time. It doesn't show you the abundance of individual species, so how much of each species you've got. It tells you that you might have 15 species, but within those, we are not going to know how much of each. And also often it doesn't include any habitat characteristics, which are very important to know about, especially if you are doing some active restoration on your meadow. So on the other hand, we've got monitoring. So this is what the Rapid Grassland monitoring is about, and National Plan monitoring scheme, for example, as well, if you attended the last session. And what these are really is are repeated on regular basis with specific aims and targets. And they'll show you changes over time because you'll be doing them across different years. They'll show you abundance of species, which we'll be talking in detail about, and also habitat characteristics. They often come with a bit more elaborate templates and forms like the one you can see there. Doing monitoring on your meadow is really good way of capturing some important information about your site. And because you are using the same technique every year, you are really collecting great robust data that can be then used in scientific reports or studies. It's really important to stick with the same method. Once you pick one, you can have multiple, but stick with them so then you can compare them across different years. So why would we want to monitor our grasslands of any sorts, or meadows or other habitats? With grasslands, it might be to find out what species are actually present to start with, to find out what communities you've got. So you can actually categorize your meadow to say whether it's calcareous site, or is it an acid meadow, is it a neutral meadow. Very often the management is used for these kind of the third point that I highlighted there. It is to kind of get a feedback about, and this is what the Rapid Grassland Assessment specifically is really telling you, is your works that you are doing on your meadow, are they working? Is the restoration or the reseeding working? And monitoring is going to give you feedback. You might also want to monitor if you've got problems with any specific species, some weedy species, for example. Sometimes people might want to introduce very individual species into their meadows. Like if you've got, for example, special food plants for insects, you might then want to monitor how they are doing, how many of them are surviving, how are they spreading through your site, and just overall, how is your grassland changing? Assessment. This technique is really great for assessing grassland condition. So what the condition is like at that moment when you're assessing, and to monitor your creation progress. So if you are just starting creating your meadow, you are wanting to bring in some seeds, or you are already doing it for a few years and you just want to know how it's doing, how is your meadow changing, this is the right technique for you. Because there are repetitions of quadrats across your site, really it's kind of best suited for larger gardens and fields, because you want to squeeze lots of quadrats in one site. It's also really good for detecting short and long-term changes, because you are doing it on annual basis. And it comes with some resources already. So there is a protocol that tells you all about the technique and comes with recording sheets and species lists, which we'll cover. So just kind of an overall step-by-step doing Rapid Grassland Assessment. First step is to create your recording sheet specific to your site. Then you will get out and carry out your survey in your field, place your quadrats around. Step 3 will be recording data in the field. So you will have your templates with you, and you will be filling in your templates depending on what species you find. Once you've got these, you take it back home and you analyze your own results. And then you decide based on what you found whether you need any management on your meadow. Is there anything specific you might want to target? Yeah, so we'll kind of break this into these steps and go through them in this session. So carrying out the actual methodology, this is based on 1 by 1 meter square quadrat. You can use this kind of bespoke scientific equipment, but you can really use anything that will give you 1 by 1 quadrat. Canes are very good, just bamboo canes. That's what I tend to use. Really easy to get. We are aiming to for 20 to 30 quadrats being placed across your site. This can be completed by an individual, or you can also do it as a small group. It tends to be a bit more fun, and also it might not take them as long. So even though the Rapid Grassland Assessment is called Rapid, it's not necessarily super quick, but it shouldn't take. It depends on how experienced you are in identification of plants. how many people you've got to carry out the survey, but also what your meadow is looking like. If it has lots of species, it's going to take you longer. So you should kind of count with at least half a day of doing quadrats, but you just need to do this once a year. So yeah, it's quite quick. So you want to carry it out in June or July before the haycut, when most of your flowers are in bloom, because this is the easiest to ID. And again, depending on what kind of restoration you are doing, you want to do it on regular basis, ideally every year. But if you know that you are in this for a long run, if you are doing the kind of natural restoration without bringing any seeds in, and you know that might take much longer to create the meadow, then every 2 years should be sufficient. Arranging your quadrats across the site. So there are a couple of different ways which are quite commonly used in techniques, not only rapid grassland assessment, but other sampling techniques. You can kind of create a grid across your site. So it's kind of semi, what's the word? I lost the word, the semi-randomized, sorry. So it's kind of, it's not gonna be the same every year, but it's pretty equal. So, you know, if you've got some influences from your hedgerows, for example, if you know that there might be a drift from one side coming of nutrients, you might want to place more quadrats there. And then the very common one is, this is usually with the ones that I use when we are doing the training, is the W walk through your field. And again, you kind of see that it's a W shape. You are walking across the field, and the idea is to cover your field quite evenly. So the individual stops, you should aim to have them equally spread in between. So it might be a good idea to, before the summer season, to just get out into your field, see how big it is, do a bit of a walk, and just have a bit of a think about how many quadrats you think might squeeze into your field. So then you know if you are maybe working with 20 or 30 quadrats to cover your site really well. If you've got two different types of meadows, it often happens that maybe one corner of your field might be a bit wetter, the rest of your field is quite dry. Then you might want to actually do two sampling areas. So you will want to create two separate spreadsheets and do two separate Ws across your field, because they are really two different habitats. So this is what the kind of template looks like. This one is the one that's used in the protocol. So I think Lauren is going to share the links with you for the protocol and for the spreadsheet. So the Excel spreadsheet that we are going to share with you is a bit more updated. So you'll see it's slightly different to the one I'm using here, but it's otherwise it's very, very similar. The kind of general sections are going to be the same. So what we are looking at, one part of the form is going to be all about your indicators. This is all your plant species you want to have there. And the other side of the spreadsheet is going to be all about your habitat characteristics. So I mentioned indicator species. So these indicator species are very useful kind of tool being used in ecology and in all the different fields of ecology. Because I mean, ideally you might want to have a full species list for your site, including grasses and everything, but really it's not entirely necessary, especially if you are just trying to gauge the kind of overall assessment of your site. Is it in a good or is it in a poor state? For that, you can look at this kind of carefully pre-selected set of what we call indicator species, because looking at those is going to tell you kind of exactly, it's going to reflect the condition of the grassland. So there's no need to do all of the species. So this is used very commonly across different fields as well. For example, in kind of freshwater ecology field, when they are trying to assess the quality of water, they look at caddisflies only, because they can then extrapolate if they look at their diversity, then they know whether all of the other fauna might be as diverse or not. And often these indicators are then divided into positive and negative ones. Yeah, so with positive and negative indicators, we've got a couple of examples here of positive indicators, like bed's-foot trefoil, for example, is a really good indicator of your kind of hay, neutral meadows, while thyme is a really great indicator of good quality calcareous grassland. And a couple of negative indicators we've got here is creeping thistle and common nettle. So these tend to be kind of a very similar species for all different grasslands. They kind of more what we would call weedy species, but really they are not bad plants. That's not what we are trying to say at all. We know they're absolutely amazing for lots of insects. Nettles and thistles are great. But they might indicate something. They might kind of be indicating an underlying problem in your meadow, for example, lots of nutrients or lots of compaction. And if there is a lot of them in your field, you will probably find it quite hard to manage your meadow. So overall, with the assessment, we are trying to find out what they are and how many of them there are. We are trying to aim for increase in the number of positive indicators and decrease in the number of negative indicators. And then also with the kind of frequency and amounts of them across the fields, we are also aiming for positive indicator frequency to be increased. So for our wild thyme, for example, to appear in our grassland, but also to spread around it. And negative indicators, we are looking at lowering their frequency. Yeah, so as I said, the Rapid Grassland Assessment Protocol provides you already with some really good notes. So if you want to have a read of it after this presentation, because there is only so much I can squeeze into an hour, it's quite a detailed process. So to get all of the detail you need, do have a read of it. There are some really useful templates there as well already for you. So at the end of the protocol, you will find indicator species lists. So the ones that are already there are for these 6 different meadow types. We've got lowland meadow, upland hay, floodplain, marsh marigold calcareous, and purple moor grass, or the kind of raw pasture. So these lists already exist for you to use. And there are also examples of the templates there. So just empty templates that you can use for lowland, floodplain, calcareous, grassland, and purple moor grass. Yeah, so Lauren is going to share this with you in a chat, both links for the protocol and also individual template recording sheets. Those you really want to have in Excel, because you will need to be able to adjust them slightly and add some species for your site. So those need to be in Excel really. So the first part of our template is all about populating it with the species that we would like to monitor. So looking at the kind of positive indicator species for your site is a good idea is use the supplied species list as a guide, because they will really reflect on the kind of common species that you would expect to find in, for example, hay meadows or calcareous grasslands. So use those as a guide, but you will probably want to adjust them slightly so they fit for your site. You can also use some historical data. So if you've got any data for what was historically found in your site, you might want to include those. If you are in an agri-environment scheme, or even if you are not, there are some really good lists there that they are using under indicators of success. So this is farms that are kind of aiming to reach a specific point for agri-environment schemes. If this is relevant to you and you already started your restoration and you brought some seeds in, whether this is from a green hay or from a shop bought just a mix of seeds, then it might be a good idea to also include these there, because it's very likely that they will start appearing. It might take them a few years. Some species might take 5 or 6 or even 7 years to appear in your grassland, because they just kind of wait for the conditions to be ready. But if you've got this information and you know what seeds went onto your site, you can add these into your monitoring form as well. You can also add species that are kind of like your aim. So if you are aiming to have some more common orchid species, or some like really good indicators of your grassland, like those scabious. You can add those in as your aim. And as a general rule, don't really pick rare species because they are going to be quite unlikely to fall within your quadrats, or also those that are hard to identify. So the templates that are provided all have, I think, a couple of really common grasses. But again, you wouldn't want to add too many more of those because they are quite tricky to identify and will make the whole process a bit harder to go through. So as a general rule, you are aiming for 10 to 15 positive indicator species. Choosing your negative indicator species, I mean, quite similar to your positive ones, and this shouldn't be, I guess, that hard because these negative indicators tend to be the same species for all the different grassland habitats and different types. You will very likely have species like thistles, for example, or nettles or brambles. So these are the species that like quite lots of nutrients. You might have species that are kind of creeping. Those are often indicators of compaction, actually, because they've got a kind of creeping habit. They don't really mind the compacted soil as much, and they quite thrive in the soils that are compacted, where wildflowers are going to struggle. So species like creeping thistle, creeping buttercup, you might find those in your meadows. Bracken can be sometimes a problem in some places. Soft or hard rush if your meadow is a bit wetter. And then also ragwort. So if you wanted any kind of extra help with compiling your species lists, if you start with the templates, but do have a look at some of these other publications as well. These can be really good. They can give you really good ideas of what species to kind of aim for. So you've got various different lists available. They are more or less pretty similar. So there are lists for the UK Biodiversity Action Plan under priority habitats. We've got the common standard monitoring guidance, which is really all about monitoring the kind of really high quality special scientific interest sites. And then we've got various different Natural England publications. So the one that I use the most is the one in the bold. I think, again, Lauren is going to have a link for you on this. And this is just a really amazing document. If you go open it from page 55 onwards, that talks about grasslands, and it's a really great and quite clear and simple way that tells you all about different types of grasslands. How do you actually tell different types of grasslands? And then for each kind of grassland gives you a list of positive and negative indicators, and also what you should be aiming for in terms of the condition of your grassland. So the other part of your template is all about choosing your ecological variables. And again, if you have a look at the Natural England document that I just talked about, that's going to have a lot of these variables there as well, because they are the really common ones that are being used when you're monitoring grasslands in general. So you might like to include things like cover of wildflowers compared to grasses. So this is known as the grass-herb ratio. And the idea behind this is that we are aiming for a quite good ratio of herb coverage over grasses. So when we say herb in this context, this means our wildflowers. So really we want lots of wildflowers and not as many grasses. Other variables that might be quite useful to have a look at and include in your monitoring is things like cover of your scrub, or the amount of undesirable species background, which might actually then mean that if you've got grazing animals on your land and there is lots of background, that this means that you might be actually overgrazing it. So you might have too many animals on it. If you're on calcareous grassland, and I'm sure you know this already, but background is much more common on calcareous grassland than other types of grasslands, just because it's naturally on a very thin soil. So you often have the kind of limestone poking through the grass. And again, you might want to add any other variables that are specific to your site. If your aims are you know, having you would like to have marsh fritillary on your site at some point, you might want to add amounts of devil's bit scabies into your ecological variables, or indicators of waterlogging if you know that you've got problems with wet parts of your meadow, or amount of build-up of old material. And the last bit about these kind of ecological variables is, with those, they are going to be assessed in a slightly different way to our species. So with these, we kind of want to really add the limits of them. So we might want to be aiming for, say, we want to have the herb and grass ratio, we are aiming for 50%. So this is why with the ecological variables, you will want to add some limits. Or in the protocol, this is also under the phrase cover qualifiers. So it's the same thing. So really, yeah, it's all about kind of setting limits about your for your grassland. Some example questions you might want to include is, when we're talking about the herbs, you will ask, is the cover herbs greater than 40%? Or is there less than 5% scrub? So you want to kind of add specific numbers to this. And again, there's lots more examples that can be found in the protocol, and they'll kind of give you an idea of what limits you should be aiming for. So this might look very complicated, but it's not really. So this is, I just kind of put together all of this information about the different limits and the aims. So this is taken from the Natural England document, again, that I mentioned. And this is all about having your area. So this is their assessment for biodiversity action plan habitats. So they are slightly different for different types of grasslands. But again, the categories are the ones that we already covered a bit. I mentioned a few of these ecological variables that you might like to add into your forms. So for example, looking at grass and herb ratio, for a lowland meadow, the target of it is to be between 40 and 90. So again, all of this can really help you with kind of thinking about what limits you might want to set on your recording sheets. And for purple mallgrass, for example, they are not looking at the grass and herb ratio, just because the this kind of meadow tends to be a bit less species rich as well. And things will be important in different types of meadows. So if you've got a rush pasture, you might want to then look at the percentage of your rushes, and PMG stands for purple mallgrass. And yeah, again, so you can just have a look at all these different categories, and this will give you a bit of an idea of how to set your limits. I forgot to mention at the beginning, the presentation is going to have quite a lot of text, just because there is a lot to include and go through. But I was kind of thinking of the presentation as a bit more of a handout. So then we will be sharing the slides with you. So then once you've got them saved, you'll have it all kind of on a slide. So it might, I'm not expecting you to write notes on this or remember all of this. So that's just to explain that. And we will be talking a bit more about the kind of frequency of different positive indicators, the number 5, a bit later. And variables, there are 2 different ways of recording these on your sheets. You are either looking at the whole of your site and assessing cover. So with scrub and bramble, for example, this might make sense to do it just kind of visually across the whole site, because often bramble and scrub will kind of start encroaching from your site. If it's spread evenly across your site, then you might want to include it in your quadrats, but it just really depends on your site as well. So one way is recording these kind of visual characteristics overall on your site, or you can include them into your individual 1 by 1 meter quadrats. So the ecological variables that we tend to include in quadrats are the herb and grass ratio, thatch amount, and background, for example. But as I said, you will just need to kind of assess your own site And this is the kind of beauty of rapid grassland assessment, that you can kind of fit it into what you really need from your monitoring. So if you would like to monitor your bramble across the whole site, that's fine. Or if you want to include in your quadrats, that's also fine. So this is the example of the kind of filled in form. So we can see that on the left side, we've got our ecological variables. The first two columns are the ones that are kind of asking those questions where we are assessing overall across the whole site. So the questions are, is there less than 5% scrap across your whole site? And you just say yes or no. Then few of the other ecological variable questions will be analyzed per quadrat. So is the cover of herbs over 40%? Then the right-hand side of your is all about your indicators. So you've got the positive indicators to start with and listed them based on your indicator lists that are in the protocol. Then we've got some space for additional species, because as you are walking through your site, you might discover some species that you didn't know about. So you might want to add some of the wildflowers in there. And then at the very end, we've got negative indicators section and some space to do just like simple data analysis. And as you go through the form, we've got one line, there is one line per quadrat. So we've got 20 usually in this form, 20 quadrat to do. So this is an example of this form that you can find in your protocols. Also includes a grid reference. So this is something that you might want to decide to also note down for all of your quadrats. I've taken it out from this form just for this presentation, just so I can squeeze lots of other columns in. And also it is only relevant if you are going to then kind of translate some of this data into simple maps, which I'll show you some examples at the very end. So yeah, this is again something that if you think it would be useful for you, you can do a GPS reading of all of your quadrats as well. So you might have come across some slightly different templates, but really they're all based on very similar, like pretty much the same technique, really, just the form looks slightly different. Herefordshire Meadows group has got a really good one where it's just kind of the other way around to Rapid Grassland Assessment protocol, and they are based on 10 stops rather than 20, and they don't have the habitat indicators there, for example. National Trust, again, very similar. They also have subdivided their indicators into two different groups. So they have the kind of super good indicators and the kind of medium indicators. So again, that's something that can be done. And Essex Wildlife Trust, again, very, very similar to the Rapid Grassland Assessment protocol based on 20 stops, but just kind of laid out in a slightly different way. So if you think that these forms might be a bit easier for you to use, you prefer these, then yeah, you can find these online as well. So when we are recording our data in a field, this is the kind of process that you would normally go through. At the very top, we just have some very basic information about the name of your meadow, who recorded, what time of the year. And then we kind of go from the left to the right when we are filling in the form. You first answer your ecological information, questions about the whole site. Is there less than 5% scrap? Yes. Is there less than 20% bracken? No. So those are just the kind of examples. And before I take you through the rest, because they will be then filled in the same way, this whole form is based on what's called presence and absence of data. So when you are answering yes to the question, you either put yes or 1, or when you are answering no, you put 0 in. So I didn't kind of fill in the zeros because there is not as much point. I prefer using the ones for yes rather than Ys, because then when you actually put it into Excel, you can just very simply add the ones, and you will see a bit later on why that makes sense. But yeah, that's the methodology behind it. So then when you are filling in your ecological variables per quadrat, you'll be if the question is the sward less than 25% of litter or thatch, and if your answer is yes, then you just pop 1 in. And that's pretty much it. I hope that's clear. Again, with your species, pop your quadrat down, have a look what species there are, and put ones into those species that are present in your quadrat. So for quadrat 1, for example, we had only 2 positive indicator species there. There was bird's foot trefoil and yellow rattle, and we didn't have any negative indicators. And then you move on to your next quadrat and do the same. So that's the technique. Your data in your from your templates. Once you finish your whole site, you finished all of your 20 quadrats. Now you can pull out some quite simple statistics from it, and everyone will be able to do that. You don't actually even need Excel. You can either just add it up by hand, or if you've got an Excel spreadsheet, you can put it all in. It's quite a nice way of doing it, because then you just drag it very simply. It does all the calculations for you, and you might want to create some simple graphs as well, and then store your data there year by year. So if you are looking at 2 different ways of analyzing this, when we are looking across from left to right, we are looking at how many different species we found in each quadrat. And if you are looking from top down, we are looking at frequency of each species across the whole site. So these are the 4 main numbers you might be interested in getting out of your forms. This is number of different species per quadrat. So we can see that in quadrat number 1, we only had 2 positive indicator species, and we had 0 negative ones. So this is the number of species per each individual quadrat. Then you can average it out. We can see that the top number was in the second quadrat was 5, and the lowest number was 1. Yeah, so you can do the average. And then looking from top to bottom, we are looking at frequency of each species across site. So if you look at the second species, for example, which is common bird's foot trefoil, we can see that it was found in 4 different quadrats. And common knapweed was found in 12 different quadrats across the whole site. And then from these, you can also work out how many indicators you found across your whole site, across your whole quadrats. So that's the 4 kind of useful numbers you might want to get out. Before I talk a bit more about the frequency and the way you can kind of analyze your frequency a bit better, it's based on this day4 scale, which you might have heard before. It's an acronym. So each letter relates to a different frequency. So we've got our dominant, abundant, frequent, occasional, and rare. So there are, in different methods, there are different ways of using this scale, but all of the other techniques that I mentioned before will be using something very, very similar. So you either have a look at each of your quadrats and assign category directly to your species. So for example, if you are looking at a quadrat and you are kind of asking how much of a yellow rattle is across this one quadrat. So I kind of highlighted this quadrat there. This is actually the creeping buttercup is highlighted in there. And the way you do it is you kind of mentally think about all of these highlighted areas and try and squish them into one corner of your quadrat. So you are really kind of doing the percentage cover of the quadrat. So for me, that would probably be maybe 30%. So then we can translate it into our table and say, okay, our yellow rattle was occasional within the quadrat. But then if you imagine doing this for every species, for every quadrat, it's going to take quite a long time. So the way the Rapid Grassland Assessment uses this day4 scale is really, we are kind of relating our ones and zeros into the scale. So it's gonna take much less time. It's going to be much more efficient, and you will understand a bit more on the next slide. But for example, we are not looking at yellow rattle within just one quadrat, but we are looking at all of them. So if yellow rattle was found in 50% of quadrats, which means 10 out of 20 of them, then we can say that it was frequent across our site. And this is a bit more efficient way of doing it. Also, again, just to simplify it even more, this kind of says exactly the same thing, but if you translate it into your 20 quadrat template, you can also say if your species was found in 1 to 2 quadrats, it's rare. If it was found in 5 to 8 quadrats, it's occasional. And if it was found over 8 quadrats, it's frequent. And this is something that I was trying to, I thought I was going a bit crazy right in this presentation, but of course it's going to be slightly different depending on how many quadrats you have. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you are following the template with 10 quadrats, your frequencies are going to be slightly different to 20 quadrats. So just to analyze a bit more the Meadow. So the results from this would be, for example, looking at the just a number of different species per quadrats. We can say that we had between 1 and 5 different positive indicators. And 17 out of 20 of our quadrats had no or 1 negative indicator species, which is pretty good going. For our average number of indicators, it came up to 2.9. And now talking about the frequency, I'm hoping this will make sense now, frequency of each species across site. So we can now kind of flip the number into our frequency words. So for example, for our common beds for trefoil, it was found in 4 quadrats across the whole site. And we know that now means that it's actually rare, it's pretty rare across the site. For common knapweed, it was found in 12 quadrats across site, and this is going to translate into frequent. And we just do this for all of our species, so we know what frequency they were found. So we know that 7 species were rare. We had 4 occasional species. 1 species was very frequent. And then the same for our negative indicators. We had 1 occasional indicator, negative indicator, and 3 were rare. And the last thing that you might want to pull out of your spreadsheet is the total number of your indicators across site. And we can now see that we had 12 of them. Just the average. For analyzing your ecological variables, really it works exactly in the same way as your positive and negative indicators. For your overall site questions, you just say yes or no. But for your quadrats, because we're doing it exactly in the same way as the positive and negative indicators, we could say in the in answer to the question, is the SWOT less than 25% liter? And 10 of the quadrats said yes. This again we can translate into the frequency. So we know the liter is frequent throughout the SWOT because it was found in over 50 of our quadrats. And I just want to relate this to the tables that Natural England have, because these kind of tell you what you should be aiming for if you would like to include your meadow into the kind of biodiversity action plan or priority habitat mapping. This is what they will be kind of asking for, and these are the assessments they are looking at in terms of lowland meadows. So let's just see how our mock meadow would have done if we compared it to their assessments. So the Natural England is asking for less than 5% or no more than occasional cover of our negative indicators, which now the kind of frequency I'm hoping is making sense, because this is how they assess it as well. So we did pretty well because only 1 of our negative indicators was occasional, and they're asking for no more than 1 occasional. So that's really good. So we passed on that front. Again, in terms of cover of invasive trees and shrubs, they're asking for less than 5% scrub, which we hit, so that's great. And cover of bare ground, again, we didn't have more than 5%, so that's really good. For some other categories, though, we wouldn't have really passed their kind of limits on assessment. So they were asking for the herb grass ratio is to be occasional. But yeah, sorry, abundant, but we only had it occasional, so we didn't just hit it. And number 5 really is a question about the diversity of your species and how many species are spreading across your site. So to pass the assessment, 2 of these positive indicator species need to be frequent throughout the site, and 2 need to be occasional. We only had 1 frequent, so we almost passed it, but we needed 2 species to be frequent. And again, for cover litter, this cover of litter, we didn't pass. So what that means really is that the verdict for our mock meadow would be that some management is needed to bring our grassland to the kind of favorable condition under natural England standards. And more specifically, we would probably want to look at the diversity of our indicators, probably increase them if we can, and look at our bracken and litter and control that a bit. Just very quickly, advantages of adding your site into your into the priority habitats is that you can then have it included into the kind of official habitats inventory in the country, which could be really advantageous for you if that's something that you are aiming for. So your meadow might be then officially recognized as a lowland meadow habitat. You might get some access to governmental schemes, and because it's going to be mapped and recognized, it's going to be somewhere, then you will have something to kind of stand on if you need to use this in some disputes into the future. I'm just going to skip this because I'm just aware of the time. I only noticed that yeah, we don't have that much time. Yeah, don't worry much about this. This is from the protocol, so it's just the same. But very quickly, just a couple of examples of actual case studies. So this is a site that was restored over 3 years, and they looked at the increase of their average number of indicators. So you can see that every year the average of the indicators was increasing. And what's interesting here is that they brought some seed from different donors in green hay, and they know that the donor site had an average of 7. So this is something that they are aiming for. You can also then put this for individual species. So looking at how your yellow rattle or other species are doing across the site. And again, you can do average of them across the whole site. So just some simple, nice graphs that you can create for your site. And lastly, I mentioned before this mapping. This is something that you can then create if you do decide to take GPS readings for all of your quadrats. You can then plot them, so see where you took your readings, and also translate it into individual species again. So you can see on the left side, the yellow rattle was present in the quadrats that are yellow, and the ones that are red, it was absent from. And again, if you've got a specific problem with some weedy species, you might like to map it. So this map on the right shows you where the common ragwort was present on that side. So that might be something quite useful to have for your site. And that's it really from me. It's a bit of a rushed ending, I just realized the time. But really the next thing will be to read the protocol. We will give you the PDF handout as well, because there is a lot of kind of explanations and text that might be useful. And please do have a go at the your field before the season starts. Just have a go. It might sound a bit scarier than it actually is. And we will be also running sessions on these across Wales in between May and July. So please look out on our social media for more information on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucia. Sorry, I am just popping our email address into the chat as I speak. So bear with me a moment. Okay, so thanks, Lucia. That was great. Lots and lots of really useful information to digest, lots to think about and start putting into practice. So we've had lots of questions in. try our best to go through a few now. While I give Lucia a moment, if you do have any feedback for the session as well, we always like to hear what you thought about the session. You can pop that into the chat feature. And just to note, there are further Spring into Action sessions that we're involved in. So there's 2 sessions on making wildflower meadows and mini wildflower meadows in your park or garden. There's 2 sessions around community meadows, and there's also a session around making spaces for species. All of these sessions and the full programme of Spring into Action can be found on the programme page, which I've popped in the chat for you. As well as that, the Magnificent Meadows Cymru project, which myself and Lucia work on, we've got a number of online and in-person events coming up on meadow making, winter grazing, insects and pollinators, and also managing meadows for reptiles and amphibians. Again, all those events and information about what we're up to at the moment can be found on the link in the chat. So I'm just going to come to the Q&A. We've got quite a few people asking some similar questions. I'm going to kind of group them in. So Georgina, Connor and Susan have all sort of asked similar questions around, obviously given the difference in field size, how many sort of meters apart would we suggest quadrats should be, and how many are needed? Is this dependent on the species distributions and obviously what's contained in the field? So yes, that's the sort of first question.
Yeah, good question. So there is not really a prescribed distance between the actual quadrats. What you are aiming for is 20 to 30 quadrats across the whole site. So that's why I said it might be a good idea if you've got time to just get out to your field now and just have a bit of a walk and kind of roughly measure how far from each other the quadrats need to be if you need to fit 20 of them. So you might just need to have a bit of a walk. But yeah, I mean 20 to 30, double your walk. And yeah, it doesn't really depend on the distribution of your plants, because the idea is to not do it biased. So you don't want to specifically put a quadrat into the place that has got lots of orchids. So the idea is if you have 30 of them, that should give you a really good representation.
Thank you. And then we've got Sarah, Kate and Don have all sort of asked again similar question around what do we mean when we refer to litter in meadows? So kind of what we're referring to, and then how do we monitor it? So do we monitor it visually, or kind of how would we go about assessing that?
Yeah, good question. So this could be a couple of different things. If you've got trees in a margin in your meadow, whether that's hedgerows or actually mature trees, this could actually be the leaf litter from the trees. But more commonly, especially in hay meadows, is what we call thatch. So this would come under litter category. And this is the buildup of old grass that you've got there. So if you do a hay cut, you remove all of your hay, there's always going to be a bit of the kind of dead material that stays there. And especially if you are not grazing it then over the winter, it's just going to slowly accumulate. So you might just want to keep an eye on that if you are not grazing. And the way you would record it is you probably would want to do it within your quadrats and have a look at how thick the thatch is. So you don't want it to go super thick. So then the wildflowers can go through it.
Great, thanks Lucia. Then we've got a question from Bob and Cameron, which again are sort of similar in terms of would we recommend using sort of fixed quadrats, so it's in the same position for every survey, or should it be semi-randomized year on year? So we've had quite a few questions sort of around that theme.
Yeah. So with this technique, it's semi-randomized really. Where if you look at National Plant Monitoring Scheme, they've got a fixed quadrat. They only do one massive one, so it's a 5 by 5 meters squared, and it always stays in the same place. It would be quite tricky, I think, to be able to get the exact position and the angle of your 1 by 1 meter squared anyway, but you don't need to do it. So if they are just slightly placed slightly differently every year, doesn't matter. Aiming for 30 of them.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm just going through the questions now. So we've got a question from Norman, who said that we've sort of mentioned ragwort as a negative. in his urban area, he sort of encourages it. So I wonder if you could just explain a little bit more about the reasoning for it being a negative.
Yeah. No, that's a really amazing question. And yeah, and as I probably didn't make it as clear when I was talking about the negative indicators as well. And like everything with this technique, it really depends on where you are doing the survey, what your aims are, what would you like to get out of this. So ragwort is not a negative plant at all. I absolutely love it. I always find the most insects on ragwort, so they definitely would not want to remove it from our meadows. This, however, might be a problem if you are a hay meadow and you would like to sell your hay. No one is going to buy it from you. So if you've got ragwort in a hay meadow setting, it could be considered as a negative indicator. If you've got it in an urban setting, it doesn't need to be a negative indicator at all. It does, however, have a tendency to spread a bit. So just do keep an eye on it, because it does have those kind of botanical characteristics that makes it officially weed. And that's not only about the kind of being poisonous in hay, but it's also the fact that it does spread quite easily and it does tend to dominate if it's not kept in check. So yeah, definitely not a negative plant, but keep an eye on it.
Great, thanks, Lucia. So I think we've got time for one more question. So this is from Louise, and she's asked, how can we find out about the meaning of the indicator species? So for example, kind of what they tell us about the site. So for example, she sort of said nettles could mean an enhanced nutrients in soil. So would that be covered perhaps under some of the schemes and links that we've talked about today? And perhaps if we can give a bit more information on that.
I don't know whether there is like one place that states it. I think for me, it's just, gathering all the different information and knowledge from all the different books and just looking at all the different sites. I think there might be some indication in the protocol, just in the way I explained it in the slides. But generally, the kind of nutrient-loving species are nettles and brambles, but then also lots of the weedy species do take advantage of the nutrient loving areas as well. With creeping buttercup and the plants that creep, that can be an indication of compaction, because they creep over, so that can tell you something. And again, there's no kind of one answer for it, because they will tell you lots of different things. Like with docks, for example, they can be an indication of compaction, because they're really good with that, but they can also be an indication of high nutrients, but also of disturbance, because they really love it. So it's probably not all in one place.
Great. And actually on that, Susan's just commented in the chat saying to see the plant, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Plantat Ellenberg indicator values, and their index can be found online. So perhaps doing a quick Google search and we can look
okay.
that well.
That's good. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah,
something as well, a session. So thanks, Susan. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody for attending.
We could have a couple more questions if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
There's lots.
Let's have a look then. Okay. So let's have a look. I'm going to put these two questions together. They're different, but so Katerina's asked, how do we quantify grasses versus flowers? And we've also got a question about, are all the indicator species herbs rather than grasses? So I know that they're different questions, but I guess it's again looking at the meaning of what those sort of terms are.
Yeah, that's a good one. There are a couple of common grasses, but again, it's just going to depend on what you can do as well. If you can't identify the grasses, just do your indicators as wildflowers. If you are all right with grasses, then put a few in. Why not? Because they are going to tell you how your grassland is developing. And if you've got, we also are aiming for a really nice diversity of grasses, but just because they are very difficult to identify, they don't tend to be included in those common indicators. So it's just gonna depend on your knowledge and the ratio of herbs to grasses. So this is to do with the shapes of the leaves as well. And if you go out into your meadow in the summer, you will start kind of noticing how quite different leaves from grasses are to your wildflowers. So the leaves of your grasses tend to be quite thin and long. And the different wildflowers are going to have lots of different shapes of the leaves. So even before the flower, you should be able to just have a look at your grassland and say how much grass you've got. Is this mainly grass? And then within your quadrat, this is kind of based on the technique that I was just briefly mentioned, it's more about percentage cover. So you are trying to, this is what the National Plant Monitoring Scheme is based on. So you're trying to really, in your head, kind of clump all of the grasses together and squish them into one corner, and then assess how much of that quadrat they take up. So we want the ratio of maybe going for 60% of the quadrat should be covered in your wildflowers and 40 in your grasses.
That's great. Sorry, I'm typing at the same time. So I'm just saying thanks to Susan and Cameron for that recommendation. Thanks, Lucia. That's great. So yeah, I hope, like I said, I'm sorry we didn't get to cover everybody's questions, but there were quite a lot. So hopefully we have covered the broad spectrum of what people would like to find out more about. And we do have, like we said, more sessions coming up. So please do check out our events page, and that's kind of got a full list of what we've got coming up. And if you do have any specific questions, then please feel free to get in touch with us. You can either email the team at meadowscymru@plantlife.org.uk, or you can get in touch with us through our social media. And do keep an eye on our social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, because that's kind of the most up-to-date really in terms of opportunities and events that we're involved in. So thanks again to Lucia for a brilliant presentation. Thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon and for your questions. And hopefully we'll see you at some future sessions. So thanks again. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. Bye.